So let's think a minute about the legacies of these women. You know, how do you see people like Gertrude Bonin and people like Mabel Pinghua Lee? How do you see their legacies being realized in women leaders of today?
I mean, Kamala Harris, a Western woman, right, as vice president, um, drawing strongly from the African American political tradition, but also, right, always emphasizing that her mom, um, right, as an Indian woman and an immigrant, that shapes her politics as well. So, you know, a lot of these women were somewhat frustrated, I think, after 1920, or even after 1924 in the case of Native women. Mabel Pinghua Lee couldn't ever vote. As far as I know, she never does vote because, again, the Chinese Exclusion Act said immigrants from China cannot become naturalized citizens. And she had immigrated when she was about 5. Nina Otero Warren, initially, right, the Republican Party puts her up for congressional representative in 1922. And she's one of the first women to run for office after the ratification, but she loses. She continues to do work. She's a superintendent of Santa Fe schools. She gets appointed to superintendent of Indian schools in New Mexico. And then later, as I said, is appointed to work in Puerto Rico during the New Deal. So she kind of continues to have a political career, but not in elected office. And Native women watch after 1928, right? A Native man is vice president. It seems like this really incredible moment, but it's also a moment when Western states are moving quickly to disenfranchise Native people. And they're using a lot of Jim Crow techniques, you know, poll taxes, literacy tests. They're also using the relationship of the federal government and Native people. So in New Mexico, as you know, and Arizona, the state courts rule that if you live on a reservation as a Native person, you can't vote. You're still considered a ward of the government. And all of the women, except for Marie Baldwin and Mabel Pinghua Lee, both pass away in the 50s and 60s. The rest of them pass away in the 30s. And so, you know, they themselves don't necessarily see these things realized. But I absolutely think that both their stories are important and can inspire us today. And they show that women from these communities were absolutely involved in this fight and in advocating for their communities and for the right to vote. But they also, right, I mean, they set some of the templates. I'm quite convinced that Bonin and Kellogg and Baldwin are influencing John Collier. And, you know, he goes on to become FDR's Commissioner of Indian Affairs and starts the Indian New Deal. And there are a lot of their ideas about tribal governments and kind of more of a dual citizenship, protection of Native traditions. And, you know, we can talk about Collier further and talk about what was good and what was bad, but I see some of their legacy there as well. I think both in who they are and how they matter today and thinking about this long history, but also that some of their ideas really got into the suffrage movement, really get into some of the other political movements that they're involved in. Carrie Williams Clifford helps found Washington's NAACP and the Ohio Federation of Women's Clubs. Both of those groups continue to exist today. So their legacies are there, and I think are really valuable.